When you're setting up a full bag of equipment, typically it's pretty easy to pick out your irons, driver and possibly a 3-wood. But then what goes in the middle in that awkward gap? Today I'm going to be joined by my colleague Dan Murphy, who's going to run through 4 different options he's found to try and fit that gap in his bag. Right, let's get started. It's fair to say at the top of the bag, sometimes you struggle to pick what you're going to put in play between kind of your woods and then your longest iron.
If I could, I'd carry 20 clubs because there's always something else that you need for a particular shot.
Whenever I get like a long iron or a hybrid or a fairway wood, he's tinkering in the office. So we've sent him to Ping and he's done a full fitting. So we've got 4 different options for what he could have in his bag. Just want to talk through a little bit what happened in the fitting and what options you've ended up with.
Yeah, so the idea was to see if I could find 4 clubs that each under range conditions broadly carried somewhere around the 210, 215 mark. So we began with a long iron, so that is a G425 4 iron. We then went for a crossover, 3 crossover was the nearest equivalent. Then into a hybrid, so a 3 hybrid, and then finally into a G425 max 7 wood. And I have to tell you that when I was being fitted for the 7 wood, there was some danger that I was going to take the roof off. I'm a very, very high ball hitter, so that was a really new thing for me. So obviously it's one thing what they do when they're on the range, but the real point of the test was to take them out, use them from a variety of scenarios, and then see how they performed.
So before we hit any shots, in terms of kind of your predictions, before you got fit for these, what would you think each club was going to do and what would you have maybe hesitate about certain options?
So over the years, I've gone from being somebody who carried 2 hybrids to somebody who hasn't carried a hybrid for years. And I wouldn't carry a lofted forward because it would go too high. These are all my perceptions. I love the idea of crossover because I love a driving iron. Just slightly concerned about whether I can keep the flight down. So I guess when I was being fitted, I quite like the idea of the G425 4 iron because I thought that might give me a really nice strong flight with a bit more forgiveness than my current clubs.
Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take all 4 out on the course, hit them from the fairway, the rough and the tee and see which performs best overall and try fix that gap in your bag.
Great, let's go.
So first off, we're going to start in the fairway because really this is probably going to be the easiest scenario to test all 4 clubs and see the difference in performance. So typically in this scenario, what would be the club that you would pick out of this bunch?
Well, none of them, that's the thing, because at the moment I'm not really carrying any of these clubs. So I guess normally if I was on the golf course, I'd be thinking, it's quite a lot for my normal 4 iron, but it's not quite a 5 wood. So this is kind of the point of the exercise to me. Yeah,
so I think typically from playing with you, you would generally probably go for a long iron more. So maybe we should start there and then move up through the woods.
Okay, let's do it.
Right, let's start with the 4 first then. Maybe we should just stop the video now because you just hit that to about 3 foot. Now, I would say typically that was a pretty straight ball flight. In terms of height, what would you say the trajectory was like compared to the rest of your game?
For me, yeah, probably pretty typical. I hit it pretty high. But my concern with that particular 4 iron is that it does go very high. So it's obviously what it's supposed to do, isn't it?
Yeah, well, obviously that's the G425, so it is designed for a bit more forgiveness, a bit more launch, because typically people who go into that club, it is what they'd want. And I guess a lot of people do want that in a long iron. It's just the scenario that you already hit it quite high. But maybe if we move into the crossover and see if that would fly a little bit lower. Pretty straight ball fly again, but I don't think the height was that much different to the previous one.
No.
If you think you're wrong, but
no. I've always found this with crossovers that I hope that they'd be quite penetrating. I actually think that they're closer to hybrids, so I actually think the design hit it pretty high. So when I've been using this in practice for today, what I've tended to find is that it doesn't go appreciably lower than the long iron.
In terms of distance between these two, what have you found?
So I'm finding that I'm getting a tiny bit more out of the crossover, but not as much as I would expect. So no major reason to carry it. The only thing this does seem to do is it seems to go straight, as in wherever it's pointed it ends up. So it doesn't. So for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to have as much side spin on it.
Yeah, so probably good for a windy scenario if you were going links, something like that. So between these two irons so far, what would you think is your preference?
I think I would probably stick with a 4-iron. I would just feel that I had a little bit more control over it, and because this is going so high, to me on a windy day, it's not something I'd be reaching for.
Well, for the nearest the pin, the 4-iron's definitely winning anyway. Right, let's move up into the woods and see if we see any drastic differences. Now, the hybrid's an interesting one because it's not a club you would typically game. Is that correct?
No, so back in the day, I was like Mr. 2 hybrids, and then over time, I felt that all I got was a very high loopy and left tendency flight. I guess the left tendency thing is a big thing for me, because if I feel it's going high and it's trying to go left on me, that's like a really bad combination of things. So that's why I gave up on hybrids, and this is the first time I've used one in a good 3 or 4 years.
I definitely think recently the manufacturers have moved more to a trend where they're trying to get the hybrids to go more right, because a lot of players have said that like, they don't like to see them go left, especially tour players. So let's see how that turns out now.
Okay.
So I would say we had probably a little bit more shape on the ball there, but then the height, what did you think of that compared to the iron, and maybe compared to what you thought it was going to perform like?
So to me, that flight just feels like it's floating, less than I was expecting from a hybrid. So I'm really pleased because it feels like it's still going forward, and it feels like it's hotter for me. Like I think I can feel it off the club that it's coming off quicker than both the crossover and the iron so far.
I think you can hear that in the sound of the strike as well. It does feel like the ball speed's higher, and it just sounds like it's moving quicker too. So we've also got the 7-wood now. Let's just see what the differences are there, because I think, have you ever gamed a 7-wood?
Never gamed a 7-wood, no. Really wouldn't be the club that I'd go for at all. Although I think it probably is worth stating that since the days when I used to think about a 7-wood, the loft is probably more like a 5-wood back in the day. So I don't see it as a kind of gentleman's persuader, as people used to do. And I'm not surprised this club has come back into fashion, because Fairway wood lofts obviously have got so much stronger, haven't they?
Okay, definitely the highest ball flight so far, but it has also gone remarkably straight. I would say that's probably the second nearest so far.
Yeah, I would say still, but definitely is. Yeah, the result is good, isn't it? I couldn't, in all seriousness, go and play golf with that ball flight, because it's like a moon ball for me. But I mean, the club is doing what it's supposed to do, isn't it? And the sound is good, and it's coming off pretty quick. It's just, to me, it just looks like it's going vertical.
Yeah, I guess there's a large percent of golfers who don't have that high ball flight, so for them something like this would really help. I also think, I guess, if we were going to play it like somewhere like Augusta tomorrow, and we really need to stop it quick on the greens, this might be something you'd then pull out instead of kind of a lower launching club. But typically for you, where you play your golf, it's fairly windy and you don't really need that much stopping power because you always hit it high. So for some people it's going to fill the gap, but probably not for your game.
Yeah, no, massively. And if I was playing a golf course and it was water, and sleepers and green, that American style of golf course, I would definitely have this in the squad, ready to bring in for an emergency. But for the golf I play and the way I hit it, it's just too high a ball flight.
Right, let's go hit this from some different scenarios. I think we need to take them onto the tee box and also out of the rough and see if we see any differences in performance there.
Okay.
Right, a little bit of a different scenario now. Ball sat down a bit in the rough. Typically you'd just go down to kind of a mid or mid-iron and try and get something chasing up.
Yeah, try and bounce it on.
You don't really have a club that we could fly all the way there.
No.
So let's start in the same order as we had before and see if you feel comfortable with any of these out of this situation.
Okay. Not a bad effort, but never really going.
Nearly got there, but quite low ball flight.
Yeah.
So probably not the easiest. Maybe good on a hole where you can run it up, but if you had bunkers or something in the way, it's probably not really going to work.
No, that felt about the best I could do with that particular club off that lie, so it's not really something you'd be doing willingly.
Yeah, so that's the 4. It's going to be interesting to see if the 3 is any more forgiving. I suspect probably not, but let's give it a go and see. That actually seemed to come off faster and more penetrating, and it definitely flew a lot further than the first one. I don't know how you felt about it.
Yeah, it felt like I got a bit more on it. It still wasn't pretty, was it?
Yeah, it was quite low and kind of chunky to get it up there. It definitely wasn't a high and soft landing, but I would say out of the 2, that was probably a little bit better.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Right, my choice here would be the hybrid, so let's see how you get on with that. Now instantly you can see that ball flight was just so much higher. Like, it just looked like it was going to get there compared to the other ones where you're kind of waiting to see if it had chased out enough.
Yeah, so from lower on the club face, it got up like much quicker, didn't it? And it looked like it was going to stay in the air longer as well.
Yeah, definitely if you had kind of something around there that you needed to fly over, I think you'd feel a lot more confident using that than the other 2.
Yeah, and that was a worse lie as well. The other 2 was a bit heavier.
Yeah, you weren't very forgiving there. Right, 7 wood time. This is going to be interesting because I think people would typically think probably not to use a wood out of the rough just because of the larger volume. But so far we've had quite a high ball flight with it, so it might work out.
Wow.
That was good. I think that was probably actually the best of the bunch. I know you probably had a slightly better lie there than you did with the hybrid, but that was a really good ball flight, controlled shape, and you did definitely have the height on there to kind of give you some hold when you got down there.
Well, yeah, I mean, night and day, I would say. For like, that was the only shot I've hit of the 4 that came out like a normal shot. So it's interesting because I suspect that me from the rough is probably what it should do for normal people from the fairway. But that was really quite revealing, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's funny because out of those 4 clubs, if you'd asked me to pick one, I probably wouldn't have picked that one. So definitely quite some interesting insight there. Right, let's go and head back to the tee box and see which we prefer there. Okay, so what would be your typical kind of comfort club off the tee here if you weren't hitting driver?
So probably if it was just a fairway finder then, and it wasn't windy, then I'd probably be looking to get my 5 wood out. And if there was a bit of wind, then I'd be thinking 3-iron or 4-iron.
Okay, so we've got the 4 G425 here. Let's see how that performs in terms of height, because I know into the green we weren't quite sure about that. But see how it will get on kind of off the tee and in the pretty calm situation.
Okay.
Definitely very easy to hit. I think you would agree, easy launch, easy height. Probably not what you need in your game.
Yeah, it's like a lovely soaring kind of flight. It's just I would just worry about dispersion and control, and you know, if I happen to get a bit of turn on it, where's it going to end up?
Yeah, we could see there's a little bit of turn on that, which is kind of fine in these conditions, but once you add the wind and elements to that, we could go into a few problems. Right, let's switch into the 3 and see if there's any drastic differences. It amazes me that you actually managed to hit that higher than you do with the other club, because if I picked that up on the shelf or thought, should I put this in play, I would just think that it was going to fly lower, but that's not really been the case at all from kind of any of the scenarios we've hit it from. I would say the only place it's really been best would probably be out of the rough. So I think for you who launched it high, that's definitely not really helping you out.
It's really frustrating because I love the look of this club and I love the idea of it. And I always think when I'm over the ball that this is going to go off really fast, and then you've just seen what happens. Like, it's great, apart from it's just going up there. So for me, there's just sort of no real reason why it would help me out. So even though I've had to go with 3 generations of crossovers, and I've never managed quite to make one stick.
Right, hybrid time. Not something you typically use off the tee, would that be correct?
Absolutely not, no. It's not a club I'd use off the tee at all, no.
Now, out of the 3 clubs we've hit, you would just presume that that's going to fly the highest and be the most floaty, but then it's the opposite in the ball flights.
Ball flight's so much better off that, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can see we kind of got that kind of low to high rising shot, but also it's a bit more penetrating and it's just faster. Even in the sound, you can hear that.
Yeah, it feels like, I mean, we'll see what the data is later on, but it feels to me like there's just a little bit more ball speed, and it feels like it's trying to go forwards throughout its flight. So that, to me, is what I want to look up and see, really.
Probably the biggest surprise for you, I would guess, out of testing all these clubs.
It's an absolutely massive surprise. Yeah, this is not what I was expecting at all. Yeah, I thought, if I'm being honest, I thought that, broadly speaking, the 7 wood would go the highest. I knew that from when I was being fitted for it, and I thought this would be next. I thought this would be pretty close to it, and this works very, very differently to the 7 wood, is what I'm finding.
Right, now let's move into that 7 wood and see just what the difference is in the flight. I mean, it's definitely a fairway finder, but that went so high it almost looked like it was coming backwards at the end.
I mean, I'm laughing because the flight is sort of almost comedy, but it comes off it so well.
Yeah.
It sounds great. The speed is pretty good, and it's hitting its number, but I couldn't possibly go and use this on the golf course because it's just going vertical.
I imagine that if you were out somewhere like on the PGA Tour, like, it's perfect. You can see why so many of those players are putting a club like this in play. But for you, yeah, definitely flying a little bit too high. I feel like it could have almost come down with snow on it then. Right, we've hit all 4 clubs now. Before we talk about which was your favourites and maybe which ones you didn't get on with so well, can we look a little bit into the numbers in terms of first maybe distance?
Yeah, so if it's this isn't really about distance, because obviously we're trying to hit a gap, and yeah, it's the first thing you look for, isn't it? We're all terrible for it. The hybrid for me consistently went longer, followed by the 7 wood, albeit in a very different way, and then crossover, and then the 4-iron was the shortest on average. And so I don't think that's necessarily that when I hit it out the middle of the club, but the dispersion, that was a massive thing to me. I was quite surprised. But maybe it's really obvious, but the 4-iron is definitely the hardest club of those 4 to use, as in to hit it to the same distance every time.
And it's important to note all 4 of these have been set up, so in theory they should go the same distance, and the lofts have been kind of set across that. So it's probably more in terms of forgiveness that you get more consistent distance out of, say, the hybrid and the 7 wood.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it's worth saying that the 4-iron is the only one with a steel shaft, just because that's what I got fitted into, that was what was performing the best. So they're never going to be quite the same. But yeah, I think that the 4-iron is definitely the hardest, is what I've found when I've been hitting them to hit shots again and again and again. You just find that you're dropping off 8, 9, 10 yards in a way that doesn't necessarily happen, especially with the hybrid and the fairway wood.
So a big thing for you is ball flight. You hit it quite high. What did you find with these? Was there any that kind of came out of play because of the height?
Yeah, so I think, well, the 7 wood is a brilliantly engineered piece of kit, and I mean, you're laughing because you've obviously just seen me trying to hit it off a tee, but that's not the fault of the golf club. That's the way that I'm hitting it. My goodness, that goes high. So if you're after something that goes that moonball flight that goes up and lands softly, so classic thing hitting over water, or of course maybe you've got some trees between you and the target, that 7 wood is quite a club, and it was really noticeable, wasn't it? That out of the rough, that was really the only club that seemed to get to the top of its flight. So again, if you're looking for something from less than perfect lies, I'd definitely look at the 7 wood.
I also think, like, when you watched you hit it, it just looked like a really good ball flight. It looked really solid, it flew really fast. But obviously there's one thing, a shot looking nice and then it actually being practical out on the golf course in the elements. And I guess you play it in wind quite a lot. So in terms of kind of side spin, what did you see across the 4?
Yeah, so the club that curved the least was the crossover on the data that I've got. I couldn't quite tell you why that would be, but it definitely was the one that did the least moving. Just the amount of time that the 7 wood spends in the air feels to me that that's going to be the least stable. I mean, I play all my golf basically on links and heathland courses, moorland, so I'm always playing in the wind and I hit it really high. You might think, why don't I just go and play nice parkland golf? I'll probably be a lot more successful, but I don't. So I'm always looking for clubs that can give me a bit more control.
So overall then, let's go into your favourites. Out of these 4, which one would you pick to put in your bag now?
Yeah, so it wasn't what I was expecting at all. It's the hybrid all day long. You know, I can't wait to put that back into play, and I'm sort of wondering what I've been doing now for the last few years. It's easily the most versatile for me of those clubs. It felt like the one I could use from all the different scenarios that we've tried. I guess there have been some changes in the way those clubs are designed, and that left tendency, which I've always felt in the past with a hybrid, that they tended to be quite nosy, that it felt like the nose what the toe of the club wanted to turn over. I don't feel like that at all with that club, so that suddenly becomes a really, really useful piece of kit for me.
I'm feeling quite smug now because that was my
You've only been telling me for years, haven't you?
Okay, anything else about these four? Anything that surprised you? Anything that performed in a way you didn't think it would?
Well, hitting out of the rough was that was a real eye opener, because it's something that you never do that, do you, when you're testing for clubs?
No.
It's just something that none of us ever get the chance to do. And really, there were 3 of the 4 clubs I really struggled. I mean, they were going forward, but it wasn't pretty. That 7-wood came out really well, and that has made me think, actually. And you know, we do play a lot of shots from less than optimal positions. You know, it's nice, isn't it, to have a club that you think can get you out of trouble. And that 7-wood, when I was first fitted for it, I was thinking, is there any scenario where I might use this club? And there definitely is, because I can think of some shots where the lie's not great, but you need to get some height on the ball. Maybe if you're just carrying a bunker or trying to get the thing back in play. There were some surprises, yeah. And the 7-wood, even though it's not for me, I would definitely consider that.
Keep it in the closet for somewhere with a lot of rough.
Exactly, yeah. Maybe one day when I'm back playing in maybe in Florida or Spain or something, then I'll take the 7-wood with me.
Right, that's a rundown on all of these 4 clubs. If you have any further questions, feel free to put them in the comments below. That's all for today. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our channel. And if you're after more golf content, head to the National Club Golfer social media channels for more.